The trio move deeper into the factory complex. They are surrounded on either side by vast, piston-driven engines of construction, seemingly powered by a combination of steam and arcane energy. The incessant roar of machinery, the growing, stifling heat, and the mingled stench of hot metal, machine oil, and ozone all combine to lend this place an oppressive, forbidding aspect. Matters are not improved by the fact that, contrary to expectations, the factory has so far proved entirely deserted. No workers, no cultists, no one. Here, though, they do see evidence of the machine cult's incursion, signs of battle and destruction. Some of the machinery is damaged, though by what tremendous force, it is impossible to say. At least the sniping back and forth with Mara has diminished, perhaps due to the part Tatters played in reuniting the sisters, that it has been replaced by a tense and uncomfortable silence. As much in an attempt to lighten the mood as to learn anything of note, Tatters tries to engage Lynn in conversation. "So, your boss is a vampire lord. That's a brave choice. Are you not worried he's going to get, all bitey?" Lynn flicks a glance over her shoulder at Tatters, then turns away, her focus returning to the path ahead. "Let's just focus on the job at hand, shall we? Plenty of time for life stories over tea and crumpets once we get this done." Tatters opens her mouth to reply, then thinks better of it. She has troubles enough of her own without falling out with another Veil sister. She knows she's off her game. The situation with Sitara has her more shaken than she's been prepared to admit, and ever since that last descent into the fabric and her revelation about what the cult are doing here, her hands have been shaking uncontrollably. She's not quite falling apart, but she's not far from it. In fact, it's not just her hands. Her head is spinning, her vision blurring. And why, all of a sudden, is it getting so hard to move, to think, to breathe? She manages to focus on the tangle of ruptured pipes up ahead, and then gradually processes what she's seeing. "Oh, hells!" she gasps as her brain finally catches up. "Gas!" Hello and welcome to The Lone Adventurer, an actual play solo RPG podcast with me, Carl White. I will be your narrator, your game master, and your guide as we follow our heroes on their journey into the unknown. For this game, I will be using the Chasing Adventure rule set, as well as a variety of other systems, tools, and tables as they take my fancy. A word of warning, the following scenes may contain mature themes and disturbing imagery. Listener discretion is advised. The adventure continues. Last time on The Lone Adventurer, Tatters and the Veil sisters infiltrated Hammerhold, a gigantic mechanized arms factory, in pursuit of the Ring of Winter, a deadly artifact worn by the voice of the machine. In the process of casting a spell, Tatters became aware of a terrible truth. The voice was using the ring to splice Hammerhold into the great machine, risking untold damage to both the fabric and the world. The others seem just as disoriented as she is, and Tatters knows she has only moments in which to act. "Come on, this way!" She grabs Lynn's arm and drags her back. The woman is unresisting, staggering, her eyes glassy and unfocused. "Damn it, Mara, help me!" The other sister is in not much better shape, and for a horrible moment, Tatters is lost. She's too weak to get them clear, too disoriented to save them with magic. They are not going to make it.
You know,
purrs a monstrous voice inside her head.
You always have a choice. You want the power to step yourself away from here? To take these two with you? Why, if you like, I can transport you to the ring-wheeled side. I can grant you this thing, and for the smallest of prices.
The fury and revulsion that surges within her is enough to snap her out of it. She'll be damned if she gives that accursed demon one more inch. She will do this herself, or she'll die trying. I said, come on, she yells, and with the last reserves of her strength, she pulls at the two sisters, dragging them away. It is some time later that the trio are able to resume their journey. All three look more than a little green, and Tatters in particular feels like she has been run over by a wagon. But mixed in with the nausea is an undercurrent of pride. She had found herself at the very brink of death, and yet resisted Satara's insidious temptation. She has proved something to herself in that moment, and though physically weakened, in a way, she feels stronger than she has done in some time. In many years, in fact. She struggles to her feet and reaches a hand down to Lynn and then to Mara. Up you get. It's time we were moving. Plenty of time for sitting down once we get this done. And for the first time since they began this mission, the Veil sisters look at Tatiana with genuine respect. So, a new peril circumvented, and a handy injection of self-belief for Tatters. She was overdue a bit of that. Let's see how the scene came about. The scene test kicked off with an alteration of reduce or remove an activity. No more bickering, I decided, perhaps a mark of Mara's gratitude at being reunited with Lynn. Next, we had a see what they find move, which threw up nothing remarkable, and so I decided to use the chasing adventure move Scrutinize to see if Tatters could learn anything of note about Lynn. Well, no, not with a straight failure I couldn't. That failure could have led to a GM move, but with such a low-stakes trigger, I decided to make the GM move a very soft one, and so we had another see what they find move. This time, things got a little spicier. The Oracle informed me that there was danger, specifically dangerous machinery, and I got a couple of keywords too, dangerous and colorless. Well, that could only be deadly gas, and so I used another GM move, set up an immediate danger, to foreshadow the gas with broken machinery and ruptured pipes. This called for a player move in response, and the one that fitted the bill here was Defy. This catch-all move says that when you act despite an imminent threat or obstacle, say how you do it. In this case, I decided that Tatters was using her intelligence, realizing the nature of the threat in time to make her escape. I rolled an 8, which was only a partial success, and so I suffered the move's consequence. That consequence reads, the threat only abates if you make a costly sacrifice or an ugly choice. The GM will tell you what. Now, my perchance oracle has a table built for exactly this situation. It gives a 50-50 chance of either a cost or a choice, and then, having chosen which, it details what that cost or choice is, based on a list of costs provided by the chasing adventure rules. In this case, I got a choice, and the choice was an interesting one. Assist an enemy with their goals, or suffer a condition. My first thought was that the enemy must be the machine cult. They, after all, were the focus of this mission. But what might I do that would help their aims? Get captured? somehow assist with the ritual the voice was performing? Neither of those felt particularly satisfying. And then I remembered an important fact. Our heroes have a lot of enemies. If not the cult, then who? Well, Sitara seemed the logical choice, leaving Tatters quite literally on the horns of a dilemma. It felt to me as if this choice offered real peril both ways. Selecting either option would come with a cost, in a way that felt narratively satisfying, and so Tatters sucked up yet another condition, and resisted her demon's poisoned whispers. This really was a costly option, though. In rapid succession, Tatters has picked up 2 conditions, one at the end of last session, and another one here, to add to the ones she started the game with. She is nauseous, shaky, and haunted, meaning that any strength, dexterity, or wisdom rolls will all be made at disadvantage. But that's not the worst of it. I mentioned briefly in Chapter 8 that if all stats are marked with a condition, the character crumbles. They are down and out of the fight and must make the crumble move. That's a pretty bad place to be, not least because one of the options from the crumble move is that your PC dies. So, let's just hope that things get a little bit easier for Tatters from here on in. Yeah, right. Tatters' warm glow of pride does not last long. Sitara sees to that.
Surely you can see there is benefit in us both getting what we want. Why prolong the inevitable?
The Arcanist steadfastly refuses to engage, but the demon, it seems, is in talkative mood.
My patience is infinite. You know this. But even with the benefit of our little agreement, my vessel, your time in this world is fleeting. Why waste it so in fruitless intransigence, when I can so easily grant you what you seek?
Lynn's interruption is a welcome one. Hold up, we've got something. Tatters, what do you make of this? Ahead of them, lining the walls, floor and ceiling of the passageway and spreading out far into the distance, are thousands upon thousands of small, glowing runes. Partly opening her magical sight confirms what Tatters had suspected. It's as I feared. These are recent, and they can only be evidence of the workings that the voice of the machine is conducting here. She kneels and studies the runes more closely, feeling the power coursing through them. It's a small part of a transmutation ritual, extraordinarily complex. I can't follow all of it, but the purpose is clear enough. The voice of the machine is bending reality to join together the great machine, which I think exists on a completely different plane of existence, with this place in our world. Mara steps to her side. Can you disrupt it? Tatters shakes her head. No, even if this wasn't just a small part of something much wider, I don't think I'd know how. This is a ritual far, far beyond my capabilities. I think the only way we stand a chance of breaking this is to find the ring.
Of course, there is always another alternative,
the demon whispers, the wicked smile audible in its voice.
You have but to ask.
Just shut up, Tatters hisses, realizing, too late, that she's spoken the words out loud. Both sisters step back abruptly, fixing her with gazes at once concerned and deeply wary. Who are you talking to, Tatiana? Lynn asks, the question casual, the body language anything but. The woman's hand is suddenly resting lightly on her sword hilt, and Mara has circled around behind. Tatters opens her mouth to respond, but is not sure how. Lynn sees her hesitancy and applies pressure. Please, she says, her tone brooking no debate. why don't you introduce us? And in her head, the demon purrs.
Yes, my vessel. Why don't you?
As so often happens, I didn't see that scene coming at all. And that is exactly why I love playing this game and working with oracles. From out of strange little random occurrences and unexpected interactions, challenges arise and story flows. For this scene, which I called Circumventing the Gas Leak, I raised the chaos factor to 7 and got a scene alteration again. The prompt was the reduction or removal of an activity, as well as the addition of a character. The first part of that was easy. The most obvious alteration was that the gas had gone. The second part took a little more thought. Who, out of all my existing NPCs, made sense to add into the scene? I actually pulled up my full NPC list and went through it name by name, until I finally came to the demon, at which point I kicked myself. Of course. How obvious. Satara was going to take on a much more vocal role for this scene. I used Oceanic to generate some conversation, and then moved on to my next see what they find move. As I've mentioned, in addition to creating story prompts, this custom move serves as a sort of countdown clock. The first time I made the move, I rolled a d10, and each subsequent time I've taken the move, I've rolled again, reducing the die size if I roll a 1. If I get to a d4 and roll a 1, then we've made it to our final destination. I am currently on a d8. For the prompts this time, I got the following from my Hammerhold oracle. A feature of glowing crystals or runes, that a dark truth about Magitech was revealed, and 2 keywords, small and crude. I envisaged a scene from these prompts, and then asked Mythic a follow-up question, with likely odds. Were these runes part of the Great Machine's incursion? And indeed, yes, they were. That left me, as a player, a little uncertain of what to do next. I could just press on, continuing to explore, but it felt like this location had more to offer. Chasing adventure suggests that GMs should make a move when the player looks to them to see what happens, and that's exactly what this moment felt like to me. And so I offered the GM a move, and the one it came back with was change the environment. A read-through of this move reminded me that it didn't have to be a physical change. It could be a social one, and so I had Satara dangle another carrot, and I had Tatters struggle to cope with that. And then, innocently enough, I asked the question which led to the unexpected change in circumstances. I asked Mythic if the sisters noticed Tatters' internal struggle. I figured a yes might mean they'd be a little more suspicious of her, but my result was an exceptional yes. And so, from the combination of a scene alteration and a simple yes-no question, Tatters finds her deep, dark secret on the brink of being exposed. The chaos factor is going up to 8. Let's see how this plays out. Before Tatters has a chance to respond, Satara strikes. The air around her takes on a thick, greasy quality, and shadows, once obedient and still, now slither across the walls, contorted by the malevolent will of the demon. Tatters hunches in pain, her jaw clenched as she feels the icy tendrils of Satara's essence snaking through her veins. The demon's voice, a rasping whisper, echoes in her mind, insidious and taunting.
Your will weakens, Titania. Let me in.
Her vision blurs, and she hugs herself tight as Satara's presence presses ever harder, threatening to overtake her consciousness. She drops to one knee, head spinning, but she remains defiant. I thought I told you to go to hell, she growls, but her voice wavers with the effort of maintaining control. Satara's laughter reverberates through her skull and through the hallway, cold and mocking.
You bound me once,
It snarls.
but I have grown stronger since then. You, on the other hand, well, you are not what you once were, are you? Set me free, my vessel, just for a short while, and let me lick the marrow from the bones of these two morsels.
The Veil Sisters back away in horror, swords drawn, as the demon's form begins to emerge, boiling up from her flesh like liquid corruption, a twisted amalgamation of its foul form and her own. Summoning every ounce of her will, she fights back, pitting her own power against the seemingly irresistible onslaught. And somehow, step by agonizing step, she re-establishes control. The demon howls in rage, the sound echoing off the factory walls. But she holds firm, her will an unstoppable thing, as she bears down with all her power. Hear me, Satara, ninth Duke of the ever-hungering flame. I bound you once, little demon. Now I bind you again, and a third time I bind you. Thrice bound you are to my will, and thrice bound you shall remain. This body is mine by our bargain, and you will surrender all claim to it. This I command! Satara shrieks, a long and agonized sound of loss and rage, but ultimately of defeat. Though Tatters can still feel the demon's fury as a tempest raging against the bonds of her control, she no longer fears it. The demon is back under her dominion. With a last surge of power, she banishes the demon's physical form. Its scream cuts off abruptly as it is cast out of her body. Breathing heavily, Tatiana slumps forward, her every muscle crying out in protest. She is dripping with sweat. She can still feel Satara's presence, a bleak, simmering fury held deep within her, but the threat is gone. Try that again, she whispers, her voice raw, and I will personally see to it you spend the next 10,000 years suffering every form of torment it's possible for me to inflict. She looks up to meet the gazes of the horrified Veil Sisters. To their credit, their swords are rock steady in their hands, but their ashen faces tell her everything she needs to know. You wanted an introduction? She gasps, ready to drop. Mara, Lynn, meet Satara. And once again, the GM spins the story off in a direction I had very much not anticipated. This time, it was a scene interruption that set things sideways. I named my scene Hiding the Monster Inside, with the intention of having Tatters try to talk her way out of her predicament. But I got the following prompt at scene startup. The scene is interrupted by an NPC action, with a meaning of fight exterior. And my first instinct was that this referred to Satara trying to battle Tatters for control of her body. To start with, I wasn't exactly sure how to deal with this mechanically, and I was considering using the generic Defy move again. That is, until I spotted one of Tatters' class moves, Demonic Pact. This move reads, when you summon or command Satara, roll+WIS. Well, this was bad news. The haunted condition against Tatters' wisdom meant that I'd be making the roll a disadvantage, and the consequences for failure were pretty serious. In addition to the inevitable GM move that failure would trigger, the Demonic Pact move comes with its own baked-in consequences. If things went better than expected and I rolled a 7 to 9, I'd still have to pick 2 consequences from this list. The demon demands something of you in return and will not act until you fulfill it. The demon is released from the contract after this. And the demon follows the letter of your command, but definitely not the spirit. And even if I rolled a 10 or more, I would still have to pick one of these consequences. And so I rolled, at disadvantage, with the command, no more taking over my damned body, and would you believe it? I rolled a 10. A success. Things had worked out so much better than they could have. I was right on the edge of real disaster with that roll, one that could have seen the Veil Sisters turned into chopped liver, or the demon fully breaking free, or God knows what. That could have had major implications for Tatters, and for the mission she's on. Of course, I still had to select a consequence, and so I chose the last of those three options. The demon follows the letter of your command, but definitely not the spirit. I decided that meant that the battle for her body was going to be spectacularly visible, with the demon form erupting from her flesh and then being squashed down, and her whole argument with Satara on full display to the watching Veil Sisters. And so, Tatters' cover is now well and truly blown. The truth about the source of her power is out in the open. I wonder how the sisters are going to take it. There is a lengthy pause, one charged with tension. Mara is first to speak. You carry a demon inside you. Her voice is clipped, controlled, but the intense emotions bubbling under the surface are plain to see. An actual demon. That explains a lot. I knew you were a demonologist, but this... Why would you do such a thing? Fair question, Tatters thinks, but the answer is not something either of these two have earned the right to hear. Suffice it to say, I made a choice, and these are the consequences, she replies. You must have wondered about the source of my magical power. Well, now you know. And the good news is that after a rocky few weeks, I'm back in full control. Lynn sheathes her sword and adjusts her backpack. Fair enough. Let's hope it stays that way. I like my bone marrow where it is, thanks very much. So, time to press on? Mara gazes at her sister, incredulous. Are you serious? This girl damn near turns into a creature from the pit, dead set on eating the pair of us, and all you have to say is, time to press on? Lynn shrugs. Listen, Mara. The way I see it, we have two choices. One, we murder her here and now to make sure that the thing inside her doesn't decide to go on for a rematch. And we hope that in the process we don't set the demon loose. Or two, we take our chances and keep going. I reckon we stand more of a chance of getting the ring with her than without her, so I vote for option 2. Still, if you're dead set on option 1, be my guest. Mara looks back and forth between her sister and Tatters, grinds her teeth, then turns on her heel. Fine, we go on. But I warn you, girl, one hint that your little passenger is coming back out to play, and I'll gut you like a fish. Are we clear? Perfectly, Tatters replies. They press on. If the silence had been tense and uncomfortable before, it's triply so now. Tatters cannot miss the suspicious glances that Mara periodically throws her way, and even Lynn keeps a safe distance from her. Why would she do such a thing? To allow a demon inside her? It's a question she's asked herself many times since the forging of her pact. Would the alternative have been the better option? She had made a promise, true enough, and this had been the only way she could see to fulfill it. But how much of this had been selfless sacrifice, and how much had been self-preservation? Even hunger for power. Again, as so often before, she turns the question over and over in her mind, and as before, she reaches no satisfactory conclusion. She is snapped out of her rumination, partly by Lynn's urgent whisper of warning, and partly by the sinking sensation in her gut as the unmistakable pull of magic exerts its terrible gravity. She has barely a moment to take in the incomprehensible sight before her. She is at once in the Hammerhold factory, in a chamber that rises perhaps 200 feet in height. At its core stands some manner of insanely complex boiler that looms over them, juddering with barely suppressed power. And somehow, simultaneously, she is looking at an entirely different, co-located tower, orders of magnitude larger. This spire protrudes through the surface of the void sea, the peak of a monolithic black iron structure rising 200 feet above the soft white clouds. This, Tatters realizes in total astonishment, is a doom spire. She's heard of these things, of course. Ancient relics built in an age long before the Sundering, several of which have been found throughout the Void Sea. No one seems to know what they were originally built for, but what is known is that whatever they once were, today they are inactive, derelict reminders of a long past age. This spire is a thing of cold, unchanging permanence. And yet, in this moment, the unchanging changes. An arc of purple energy crackles briefly over one angled black surface, and then over another. There is a low, droning hum and a gentle vibration that begins to pulse, regular as a heartbeat. And that's when the alarms begin to sound. And so, for I think the first time, we get a little peek behind the curtain of Tatters' backstory. As my PC, this is part of the narrative that I have full control over, and one that I have deliberately chosen not to share in any depth up until now. Perhaps we'll learn more over time. As for how that scene came together, I started off by reducing the chaos factor to 7, I named the scene, explaining the monster inside, and I rolled that the scene started, for once, as expected. Next, I wanted to see how Mara and Lynn would react, and so I made a roll for each of them on the Oceanic Behaviour Generator. For Mara, I got 4 matches, which is a pretty unlikely result. The matches were against her high neuroticism, which manifested as anxiety, against her conscientiousness of 4, which manifested as control, against agreeableness, which was neutral, and against her interpersonal disposition, which was positive. I decided that meant that she was deeply conflicted. She both liked Tatters and was scared of her. She was struggling for self-control, but feeling deep anxiety about what she had just seen. I also decided that, however this played out, I was dropping her positive disposition towards Tatters down to neutral. For Lynn, I rolled 2 matches. The first against her agreeableness of 2, which manifested as a degree of self-absorption, and her second one against her core disposition, which is generally pretty positive. I decided this meant her seeing things in terms of how they could best benefit her, and being comfortable with going with the flow. From that starting point, I threw together some dialogue, played out the interaction, and then used the aftermath for some introspection from Tatters. And then things, as things have a tendency to do, went spectacularly sideways. Innocently enough, I made another move to see what they find, only to be rewarded by the following. You find something unusual or unexpected which relates to a toxic relic. The keywords foreboding and loud are relevant, and there is danger present, specifically an alarm trigger. And faced with that set of prompts, in particular the toxic relic, well, my path appeared before me, lit up as plain as day. Suddenly, In a thrilling moment of discovery, I had a series of answers to questions that had been perplexing me for some time. I just love it when that happens. Where will this revelation lead? And what does it mean for all concerned? Well, perhaps we'll find out next time. You have been listening to The Lone Adventurer, a solo RPG podcast played, written and performed by me, Carl White. If you've enjoyed this episode, please consider telling your friends about it or leaving a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts. It really is a huge help. You can follow me on Blue Sky at theloneadventurer.bsky.social. Email me at theloneadv@gmail.com or follow my blog at carlillustration.wordpress.com. You can find show notes for this episode and all others at theloneadventurer.podbean.com, where I include any links mentioned in the episode, as well as mechanics information. I also include a link to a full episode transcript. The story will continue in the next episode of The Lone Adventurer. Thank you for listening.